Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This is Tim, and this is Second Legacy. And thank you so much for stopping by. If you are a new viewer, which you probably are because this channel is relatively new, we would love to have you jump in the fold, subscribe to the channel, help it grow because we need to get as much information as we can out to each and every one of us amongst the entire Second Amendment community to help pass the blessing on to the next generation. That's why Tim and I started this, to have a much deeper conversation, to really push it forward at a deeper level on a lot more baseline of a conversation. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So what we've got today is a bunch of different things that are happening out of California. Interestingly enough, we've already done a video on the fact that California has extreme gun control. We all know that watching this video. However, now you're seeing something unusual. You're seeing politicians, you're seeing the media, you're even seeing Gavin Newsom come out and say, it's just not quite enough. It doesn't seem to be working. And that is what we're going to dive into because there is an underlying premise which we're going to knock out. Now, with that, I'm going to toss over my partner, Tim. Tim, what you got today? How you feeling? Let's get it.
Well, man, let's jump right in because what we're seeing in California is, once again, we see politicians blaming inanimate objects for the problems within their own communities, right? So if something goes wrong, it's this whole issue of accountability, or lack of accountability, shall we say, where we no longer hold people accountable for their actions. No. In today's society, you're not responsible for being a criminal. You're a victim, even though you're a criminal, and you were influenced by an evil, inanimate object. And if we could just take away that evil influence, you as a criminal would suddenly become this, beacon of freedom and this pillar of society, and you would just, fall right into the fold, and all of a sudden everything would just be rainbows and sunshine. But we all know that that's not how the world works. This is this utopian view that anti-gunners seem to have of things. And so California, once again, obviously there's been several news events recently that put California right back in the limelight. And California, when you take a look at California, compare them to the other 49 states, if you're Obama, 53 states, but I won't get into that. But if you compare them to the other 49 states, they have some of the highest violence of any of the other states, even though they have some of the most restrictive gun laws. Now, one thing you will not hear me say, unless I really screw up, is the phrase gun violence. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as gun violence. There's violence where guns are misused. And that's what California is dealing with, a misuse of firearms. So what's really driving that? And is it really a problem with firearms as they claim, or is there something else that's possibly at the root of this problem? What do you think?
Well, I mean, of course, it's kind of a softball question. Of course, we know it's not the inanimate object, right? It's something else going on. On my channel, I know you said it on your channel before, we have an issue with the hearts and minds in our country. We don't have an issue with what's in our hands. That's incredibly important because the thing in your hands is always going to change. The constant is right in here and right in here. But let me show you, let me set this up a little bit, and then Tim and I are going to jump in to show you where we're coming from, because there's an underlying theme, which is very interesting. They always blame guns, but they've never blamed California gun control. So that's why we're going to dive into that why. All right, here's the first article. In a nation awash with guns, and Mr. Producer is number one, push for gun control takes on a feel of futility. California's gun laws have helped lessen deaths compared to other states, but court challenges and other limits have curbed effectiveness. Okay, so again, it's not necessarily gun control, but there's still a problem. Let me look at some of the actual quotes from this. California's efforts to reduce gun violence have long been a point of pride amongst the state's liberal lawmakers. We know that's the case. They tout on it all the time. But a sense of futility and despair infuses the response of many political leaders Tuesday in the bitter aftermath of three major situations in as many days. So now that's the first one. That article right there is hinting at something larger than just, man, we want this to stop. We need to pass more gun laws, because traditionally, that's what happens in California. Anything goes wrong, you need more gun control. The remedy to gun control failing, you need more gun control. And that's something that we've seen consistently. I mean, Tim, you've done this longer than I have. You would concur with that statement, right? That's a good standard?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's 100% true. And we also see that every time they pass more restrictive gun control laws, it doesn't change anything. It never has. Sometimes within weeks or days after something is enacted, another tragedy occurs. And then years later, another tragedy occurs. But there's also an interesting trend. So the anti-gunners would have you believe that at this moment in time, if you walk outside of your house, there's an AR-15 lurking behind a tree somewhere that's just going to get you. It just, AR-15s are evil. They're high-powered weapons of war, when in reality, they call them intermediate powered. I think the 223.556 is underpowered, but That's not the point. They want you to believe that the AR-15 is basically a 50 BMG that's capable of taking down satellites, and it's lurking behind every tree, and you're just moments away from being gunned down by this crazy person wielding an AR-15, when in reality, the AR-15 is almost never used. Now, it has been used in some high-profile cases, but if you take a look holistically of violence in America and the firearms that are used, AR-15s aren't even 1%, right? But the AR-15 is an easy target, and it's something that they've always honed in on. And so they always want to pass laws to ban AR-15s or to ban AKs, or the 1994 crime bill. Let's just ban things by appearances, right? Let's take away the pistol grips. Let's get rid of the bayonet lugs. Let's get rid of the muzzle devices. Let's get rid of the flippy things that go up. And then guns will no longer be used in violence because they don't look evil enough, I guess. I don't understand the logic. Never have.
Right.
But we always do the same thing and yet get the exact same result. And that's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result every time. And yet that's what we're doing in places like California and New York and Chicago and Illinois. They keep using the same flawed problems or problem-solving ideas and hoping that maybe this time something will change. Maybe this time, if we pass the right law, criminals will become law-abiding. And the reality is there are more guns in this country than there are people. So even a discussion that let's just ban guns in some utopian, effort, we'll just ban them, snap our fingers, they'll all go away, and the world will live in peace. That can never happen.
Right.
And so even in modern society, it can't happen because we have things like 3D printers that are capable of printing metal now. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. So one of the things, and this is a really important founding principle of this channel, is the concepts that we're going into right now are not meant to make light of the problems that we have, because we obviously have some problems. The point that we're hitting on is it's not an inanimate object, it's the people involved. And so when Tim and I are going into these different aspects, and I'm about to bring in Gavin Newsom, he is like gun control extraordinaire. But the point is, this is a difference in philosophy. And the big important thing, and I say this on my channel, this is something that I will say so the last days I'm on this planet, what they're asking individuals to do across the country, whether you are a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, I don't care what you are, they're asking you to purchase safety with the coins of your freedom. They're basically asking you to turn your freedoms into a currency to purchase more and more safety provided by a state which consistently fails. And that's an important piece to understand. For example, look at what Gavin Newsom said, same article. Quote, "What the hell is going on?" Governor Gavin Newsom, Democrat, said in angry remarks delivered after visiting with victims' family in Half Moon Bay, a beach town south of San Francisco where the tragedy occurred. But it was and said again, only in America. This happened on our watch. We allowed this to happen. Now, of course, Gavin Newsom is angling that towards the fact that guns exist and the Second Amendment exists, and that's a curse and blight upon the American people. In my personal opinion, that's the thing that keeps us more free than any other population on the planet. But what he said was not completely incorrect if you look at it from a different perspective. It's not about the guns that exist. It's about what's happening on our watch. And what's happening on our watch is the people are degrading in the moral and the ethics. And what's in here and what's in here is coming out by what's in here. That's an incredibly important perspective to dive into before we even hit the second article and the stats of which we're going to back these points up.
Yep. And that's one thing that I was really looking forward to getting to with regards to the stats, was this notion that, we're all in imminent danger of being gunned down suddenly out of the blue. But the reality and the FBI statistics show that violence in America and violence where guns are misused, it's been on a decline for decades. So this notion that suddenly America is more dangerous today than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago, that's not true. And what's also not true is that guns are the problem, because we know that gun ownership has spiked multiple times from Obama's administration to the present. Just in those few years, if you will, we've seen Obama was the best gun salesman of all time. And then you get into the whole last 3 years of the pandemic and all the other stuff that was going on. Gun sales were through the roof. Manufacturing was through the roof. New gun owners were everywhere. And, we have a retail store. We saw more new gun owners than we've ever seen before in our lives coming in to buy firearms. And yet, if you look at the FBI statistics, crime across the nation is going down, but it is up in some few areas. And those areas tend to be those. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Look at the graphs we have here. Number 11 and number 12.
Throw up number 12 for us there, Mr. Producer. So this shows you the decline in violence as compared to the number of guns being manufactured. The number of guns being manufactured right now, if we could roll it back, now you see an increase there, right, as we lead up to 2019. If we roll it back to the previous graphic, there's the decline I'm talking about in violent crime. So you're being lied to, and you're being played for political reasons. You're being told that you're in imminent danger, you're going to die. It's just crime and violence is through the roof, and we have to do something now. And the only thing that we can do is strip you of your liberty. Trust us. Give us your trust. The government is here to help. Just surrender your freedoms to us, and we'll provide that safety. Even though the Supreme Court says we have no obligation to provide you with that safety, just trust us. We're here to help. But the statistics are on our side. The truth has always been on our side. And the reality is, even the CDC has published things that they've since pulled that show that guns by far save more lives and stop more crime than they're used to commit crime. And the ugly reality of the world that we live in, people are always going to die. It sucks. And I'm not making light of violent crime. It sucks. Inner city violence sucks. Mass shootings suck. I wish there was something we could do. I wish I could take violence away tomorrow. I wish I could make cancer go away tomorrow. But that's not how the world works. And so our best option as free Americans is to be able to provide for our own security. And how best do we do that? We arm ourselves, get training, and exercise our Second Amendment rights. And don't listen to the false narrative being pushed to you by the media and by politicians that things are getting worse. They're getting better, and more guns are in American hands today than they were even just 10 years ago.
Right. And to tack onto that for a second, and then I'll go into the second article and I'll show you the very fine nuance of what's happening. It's not just the same people that are purchasing firearms. We saw a dramatic increase. We saw minorities and females, the biggest proportion of new gun buyers that has ever existed.
We saw a lot of folks in the gay community as well. I want to add that.
Yeah, across the board. And that's, get in here. This is a right for every American. This is not a right for only ones that are X, Y, Z. I don't care. That's not what we're talking about. This is an American right. And this is something that, and I'm getting my soapbox for a second, but this is something that the people that came before us shed their blood, sweat, and tears for our freedoms to pass this on to us, and we're going to pass it on to the next generation. But the way that we're going to do that, I'm going to show you right now. We're going to get in front of what the gun control lobby will try to do. Check this out. This is number 5, Mr. Producer, if you could throw it up there. Experts explain why California is still rife with gun violence, despite some of the most stringent gun laws in the country. So right out the gate, excuse language, but listen to where they're going, because it's not, well, if something's wrong on the state level, they're going to go, well, we need to go national. And I'm going to go to Tim in a second, and he's got personal experience with this. But let's go to number 6. Even the state with some of the strictest gun laws can't keep gun violence away from its borders. What? So you can go one of two ways with this. You can either say that it does not work. This is a mainstream source. Everything is linked. We will always link everything. You can either go with gun control won't work, so why are you infringing upon our rights? Why are we fighting in the court systems? Why are we getting Supreme Court cases? Why do we deal with the circuit courts? Why are we doing all of it if it's truly not going to do anything? Or do they say that and then go, so we need it nationally? For example, if I go here to number 7, here's another one, same article. The status quo, even with increasingly severe gun regulations, is not working. Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert Luna told reporters on Sunday evening in response to the Monterey Park shooting. Now, if you look at those things in a vacuum, you go, well, then there should be no more gun control. And yet there's still more gun control, which brings you to the entire point of this article. The article is saying, well, it's not working on the state level, which I can go to Tim. You know very well, Illinois, very strong gun control laws in Illinois and in Chicago. You live in Indiana. What's it like being the scapegoat for all the problems?
They blame us for all of the violence that they're dealing with. It's our problem that they have gang violence. It's our problems that they have shootings every single day in Chicago. They blame it on Indiana. Now, the ATF has done studies. The FBI has done studies. The number of guns flowing from Indiana to Illinois don't justify any of that blame being shifted to us. It's actually pretty minimal. Most of the guns that are being used in crime are stolen within the state itself by criminals or are purchased through straw purchases. And so this notion that there's this interstate trafficking going on from free states to non-free states, and that Illinois' problems are tied to, our easy access, if you will, to firearms is complete nonsense. And they know that. The facts simply don't bear that out. But that doesn't stop them from still blaming us. And there are gun stores right now in the bordering areas of Northwest Indiana and Illinois that are being sued by the city of Chicago and being blamed for their violence, the problems that they're dealing with in Chicago. They're blaming the gun stores. Now, these lawsuits have been going on, I think, for almost 20 years now, and they've never gotten anywhere because they know that they're not going to win in court. This is the city of Chicago using its vast financial resources to try and put gun stores out of business. They just keep dragging their feet, racking up legal expenses, and one by one putting gun stores in Northwest Indiana out of business because they don't want it to actually go to a jury. They don't want it to go to a judge because they know it's not. They're going to say that this doesn't hold up. This doesn't hold water. What you're claiming here isn't true. So It's just using the legal system to shut down legal gun ownership and shut down gun stores and deny people access to their Second Amendment rights.
Well, and so it's interesting because and this is my favorite thing about doing this show. I'm going to gush on you for a second. Like the things that come out in these conversations, when we live in the YouTube side of the world and the news side of the world and the advocacy side of the 2A, you start to put these pieces together. This is the why we put the information out. For example, another point to what Tim just said, Mexico, the state, the actual country of Mexico. First, they sued the United States for their gun problems in federal court. That got thrown out. You know what they sued next? Gun shops in Arizona. They're doing it right now. They are currently actively doing it. If you look at press releases from New York under Eric Adams, Kathy Hochul, they even term phrases like iron pipeline, talking about I-85 that goes up the East Coast. They've come with the new term polymer pipeline as the problems evolve. The point here is, everything that we're going towards shows that the points that they're trying to infringe upon and build upon are not backed by statistical fact, and they're not backed by anything other than a desire to stop guns from being in existence, because the Second Amendment is the one most powerful thing on the planet that has always proven countries are freer longer when they are an armed population. And that's pretty much as simple as it is. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's a chart I want to show up. It's or show to the audience, and it's basically the United States, and it shows the homicide rates by county. Mr. Producer, I think it's either 10 or 11.
10.
But what that's going to show you is that most of the violence, and this is, homicides per 100,000, most of the violence is taking place in the high population centers. And those high population centers are going to be in places like, obviously, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City, areas like that. And going back to the point of blaming other states like Indiana for the violence within those cities, well, why is it Indiana is so peaceful, yet Illinois, and specifically Chicago, is so riddled with crime? How is it the peaceful people are responsible for the violence across the border, right? They're trying to spread this notion that we have to ban guns across the board, even in the peaceful areas, because of the problems we're experiencing in these very small, high population centers. And that doesn't address the core problem, whatever that core problem is, that's driving the violence in these high population centers. But it's not going to stop, like you said, until they enact laws at the national level. And that's ultimately where they're going to go. But we saw an interesting thing, and this goes to one of the slides, I believe, Mr. Producer, this is number 13. And if you guys go back in time, Connecticut passed an assault weapons ban, and they gave people a certain amount of time to register themselves, their guns, and even their magazines. There was mass noncompliance. And if you take a look at this, and it was, I think it was 2011 when the Connecticut passed this law, they estimated that there was some 372,000 firearms that would fall under the classification of an assault weapon under the law, and around 2 million magazines. And so they gave the citizens of the state time to register themselves in their private property. Practically nobody did it. Now, there were about 50,000 applicants out of the 370,000 of the assault weapons, I'm air quoting. And then there was around, what did they say, 38,000 applications for 2 million magazines. Basically, mass non-compliance. And this created a huge problem for the politicians in the state. They didn't know what to do. They don't know what to do if the people just say, no, I'm not playing your game. And then we also have the other scenario that's been playing out across the 50 states where these laws are being passed. We have the sheriffs and district attorneys saying, yeah, state legislature, you may have passed this. It's happening in Illinois right now. We have roughly half of the counties saying, yeah, we're not going to enforce that in our county. Nice try. We're going to honor our oath to the Constitution, and we're going to protect the rights of our citizens. Therefore, we're not going to enforce your unconstitutional law. So we're seeing mass noncompliance at the individual level, and we're seeing mass noncompliance at the state and county level. And this is an arrow in our quiver in the Second Amendment battle.
Yep. And also, interesting side point, it's not only Illinois, it's also Oregon. We saw the exact same thing when Measure 114 came to fruition. Sheriff stood up there as well. But that is an excellent thing to discuss on another channel or another episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tim, thank you so much for being my side on this, because this is always a pleasure. And if you are watching, you are new or you're a returning viewer, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get in here with the Second Legacy so we can help this channel grow as fast as we possibly can, because personally, we think it can actually do some good. And thank you so much for spending your time with us.